By this point, I hope that you've now laid a solid foundation from which to grow and evolve, from which to further develop your own individual skills and abilities. As we go further from this point, we are going to get more in depth. We're going to get more directly involved. But before I did that, I wanted to give you some things that you should know before going into that. And some are vital. Some are so important that if you ever lose sight of, you pretty much will steal from yourself a tremendous ability to grow and develop your talents and skills. And the most important of those is labeling. It's so easy in all forms of our life to decide things are what we label them to be. But with a lot of ability, that's not a good thing. If we decide that I'm using a specific skill and I call it something, it doesn't mean at the end of the day that's what it is. And that label will actually steal from me the ability to grow my real talent. As an example, to make that a little bit clearer, let's look at two individual talents that are somewhat commonly known, although vastly misunderstood. Clairvoyance, the ability to see beyond physical, and intuition, what we commonly say guesses, hunches, impressions. Now, both can be used to create the same basic events. As an example, with clairvoyance, I'm getting an impression of a picture. I'm getting an image that I then use to generate information. But by the same token, intuition can be used to get information. But the body can also then, or more appropriately, the mind, can then convert that information into something more readily understood by me and convert it into a picture. So what that means is one ability gives me a picture that generates information, but the other can generate information that gives me a picture. So they're very interconnected that way. And because of that, because the abilities overlap like that, if you're so busy caught up on the label, you won't have a chance to develop the real talent. And that can be a problem. But even more in depth than that is that the abilities are not distinct. They blend. So as a perfect example, if I have clairvoyance, I'm getting pictures. If I have intuition, I'm getting information. Both end results are to gather information and understanding, but if I'm an intuitive clairvoyant, then it becomes virtually impossible to decide which came first, the picture or the information. It's like the age-old question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? If I have both of those abilities interblended, I'm never going to be able to separate one from the other because it doesn't work that way. And that's the reality. None of these abilities, except for the ones that we'll call manipulation-based, are distinct and separate. They all interweave and interconnect and overlap. And in many cases, you can have multiple abilities. Like everything else, you're not just going to have one skill. If that was true, we wouldn't be able to walk and chew gum. We wouldn't be able to drive or do math. We'd have one and that's it. As point proven in every other aspect of life, we have multiple skills. And sometimes we can incorporate some skills from one skill set into skills of another skill set and create new things. Like, I don't know, creativity in math. Looking at people that create new ways of looking at math. They're using creativity in math, two completely different skill sets to create something bigger and potentially better. And ability is the same thing. So if you get caught up on the labels, I'm going to say it again because it's so important, it will actually steal from you the ability to develop your talent. If you're focused on the wrong talent, you'll put your effort into the wrong thing. If I'm developing intuition and in reality I'm a clairolfactant, for example, someone who says psychic smell, my intuition isn't really going to get me very far because it's not what I've got. And I'm not going to develop my sensory abilities because I'm not practicing them. So I lose. Now, in most parts of life, we define ourselves by our labels. We use them all the time. We judge everything and label it and, want it to be understood and delineated and finite. And it just doesn't work. It's like every other part of life. It doesn't work there too, but we still use it. And unfortunately, most of us define ourselves by our job titles. But if we do that with development of these kind of abilities, we're not going to get very far. defining myself as being anything by what I do professionally, that doesn't impact all of my life. It's just a part. But if I tell myself that I am something that I'm not, a complete, absolute lie, if you will, although it's not necessarily an accurate word, then I'm not going to develop where I should. So it's so critical not to worry about what it's called or how we think it should be, because we're all different. It's going to be different for anyone. Everyone is unique. And at the same time, more importantly than that, is if we don't really understand it, how can we label it? How can we define it? And in time, as you develop more of your skills and can have a lot of experience and can say truthfully, this is what I can do and this is how it works, well, at that point, by all means, if you want to label it, go ahead, because then you're labeling it based on experience, not labeling it based on misinterpretation or misconception. And the truth is understanding itself, which is the key element in that, is the byproduct of a very simple equation. And that is, of course, knowledge plus experience equals understanding. It's important that you understand not all knowledge and not all experience go together. As an example, if I combine yellow and blue food coloring, I'm going to get green food coloring. But if I combine a yellow fruit with a green fruit and physically mash them together, I'm going to end up with applesauce, because the two just don't blend. And it's the same thing. It's the right kind of the right kind of knowledge, the right kind of experience that promotes the right kind of understanding. And that's just the way it works. It doesn't really matter if you get understanding as a result of first getting knowledge and then experience, or experiencing something and then creating knowledge, thereby getting understanding. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, until you have that in-depth understanding, don't worry about the label. Now, on top of that, I want to remind people again, at the same token, that, like I said with perception, we really don't know what we're capable of, what's happening. But the same is true with the ability itself. Just because we've created a picture, like I said in the earlier example, doesn't mean we're clairvoyant. I could have done it through intuition. So it's very important to remember that we don't really know exactly what we're doing. We don't know how powerful it is or how powerful it's capable of being until we gain more of that experience. So it's so vital that you understand that, because if you don't, as I keep saying, you're going to steal from yourself the ability to grow and evolve. And that's not figurative, that's literal. You know, if you tell yourself that, looking at most of the professionals out there, if you tell yourself that you're this gifted, you're going to stop. You're going to say, I'm done, that's good enough, no more. And you're never going to have the ability to go further and further and further. And the reality is, we don't know where the limit is. So why would we limit ourselves with labels and limits and misunderstandings? So it's so vital that you get this in your head, because what we're going to do next is start actively using some of these things. We're going to start putting them together and start developing those gifts. And if you kind of fall into that trap, it's not going to work as well. So keep that in mind, give it some thought, watch this again and again if you need to just get it to stick in. But until you get that really sunk in, I wouldn't really go too much further. The next couple clips, that's okay, but don't delve into any of the abilities until you really are prepared to deal with that fact, because it's just too easy to decide that, you know, clairvoyance is this, this, and only this, when it isn't. It's a range of things, and it's a rather significant size range to boot. So give that some thought, trust in yourself, and when you're ready, proceed further, but don't rush. It's okay. We've got time. It's okay.